Well, hello everyone. This is Sevilla I Love. And here we are on this channel, getting back to living and loving life again after a major life-altering loss, such as being widowed. Now, I'm a therapist with over 20 years of experience, 22 plus years of experience, and I'm a widow myself, and I've had a ridiculous amount of loss by an early age. I am a grief and loss specialist. And so, what I bring to you today is not my clinical work that's represented in an office under a clinical and therapeutical setting. What I offer you is my opinion based on my experience, my expertise, based on my own history and all the hundreds of clients that I've worked with over the years. Now, today we're getting into part two of being in love with a widow or a widower. What you need to know now to make this work. Now, it's been about 3 years since I made that initial video, and people are always asking me, "Where's part 2? Where's part 2?" And I kind of made a part 2, I just didn't label it as such. And so what we're gonna do is correct for the errors that were in the first one, which it kind of cut off at the end. The editing was lousy, and so I'm gonna make it up to you today. So let's start with the number one thing that is the most important if you are dating a widow that you need to know now to make this work. Okay, here it is. Not everybody is cut out to date a widow. It's just, it takes a special kind of someone to be able to be with someone who's been through that kind of a loss. Now, of course, a lot of this is going to depend on where they're at in their loss and how they have handled their loss. There is no such thing as a widow, as it's a diagnosis and everybody fits this certain criteria, although we do share many things in common. But again, it all comes down to the individual, how enlightened they are into themselves, their own personal process, how aware they have been of their emotions from the beginning up until this moment. Have they had help? Have they had therapy? Have they belonged to a group? Have they been doing their own research? Have they been reading books? I mean, have they done any work on themselves? You really need to know that, first of all, as you're moving into a potential relationship with a widower, okay? So their self-awareness is going to be huge in this process. Now, because not everyone's cut out to be somebody who can go with a widow, you need to look at the reasons why. So here's something you need to know. Understanding grief and loss, just from a basic perspective. So there are certain stages of grief that people go through when they've had a loss. Now, everyone goes through them differently. Sometimes we cycle through them all there. Sometimes they're happening all at once. We start at the end and work our way back to the beginning. So there's no, this is the stage you're in, and then you move to the next one and you're done with it. Okay. It's just definitely a cyclical process. But what those look like are denial, which is originally, I can't believe this happened to me. They didn't really die. This isn't real. Kind of standing in that state of not feeling like this really happened to them. The next one is anger, which may be anger towards the person who died, anger towards the medical professionals they feel that dropped the ball, anger towards a mental illness that may have taken somebody's life, anger towards a crime, anger to just God in general for taking your love away from you. Could be anything. Might just be this nefarious anger that nobody can quite put a finger on or define. And that's the work that the widow or widower needs to be doing for themselves. Okay, the next one is bargaining. And the bargaining is, maybe this didn't really happen. And if it didn't really happen, maybe there's something I can do to get them back. Or if I just believe hard enough, or if I just sleep long enough and I wake up, they'll be here in the morning. So there might be a bargaining stage that they go through. And a lot of times they know that that doesn't make sense, but it's an emotional response. And always remember that emotional responses, emotions are not rational. So we can't put a rational lens on an emotion. They just are what they are. The next one is a depression. So they may be very, very down and deeply sad. Okay. And that's often something that's just kind of pervading throughout the whole thing. they may be moving into a state of acceptance at some point. Now, some people are in the beginning, they may be accepting from the beginning because maybe their partner has been sick long term and they were expecting the death. So they accept the death, they accept, and they're happy that their loved one is no longer in pain or suffering. So there's different types of acceptance that somebody would need to go through, because that kind of acceptance is different from, I accept that I'm on my own now. I accept that this is my life and I have to own it. I accept that there's other possibilities in front of me. I accept that I may be able to love another person again. I accept that my life is different now. So these are different types of acceptance that somebody needs to experience and go through, and they will change as time goes on. And then there's another one that David Kessler and Elizabeth Kubler-Ross had gotten together and really decided that, and these are grief and loss experts, world-renowned, both of them, that the sixth stage of grief might actually be finding meaning, which is they were able to reflect and look back on their life and be able to understand that they have not only a new meaning or new purpose in their life, but they can maybe make meaning and purpose out of the life of the person that they've lost. So that may be creating a tribute to them, having some kind of ritual. Maybe they create a monument. Different types of things can be different types of finding meaning for that person. It might just be that the person's meaning was found within themselves, and understanding that after they had that loss, how precious life is and how much they do not want to take it for granted ever, ever, ever again, or they always want to cherish it even more now that they know what it's like to have lost it. Or maybe that they understand that they want to make different choices from here on out for the rest of their lives. So the meaning can look different. So now if your widower has done work in these areas, that's what you want to assess for, if they've done that or not. Okay, not everybody has to see a therapist in order to get better, but they do have to do their own work. So have that conversation with them to find out where they're at. How do they talk about their loss? And how do they talk about themselves in terms of seeing themselves in their own future? Do they see someone else as being included in that? Or do they say something like, well, if I ever get married again, you can live in one house and I'll live in another? That's not someone who's really ready to incorporate another person fully into their lives. So if that's what you want to be fully incorporated into somebody's life eventually, then that's something to look for. Listen to how they talk to you about their loss. Okay. Now, the next thing you need to have is you've got to have a good sense of your own compassion for other people, because the person that you're dating may have had a traumatic loss. They may have been holding their husband in their arms as he had a heart attack and died right there with them. Or they may have walked in the aftermath of a suicide. They may have just, been there after the traumatic loss of whatever that looked like. So they may be having their own trauma inside that they're still managing and dealing with. Now, this doesn't mean that they can't be with someone else, because they have that inside of themselves, but you need to be sensitive and attuned to that possibly affecting them. Okay, so means that sometimes the anniversaries are going to be more complicated, Christmas, birthdays, holidays, things like that, especially if they're close to their loss. You have to understand also that this widower is going to be rebuilding their identity. When you are married to someone, then they become an integral part of who you see yourself to be in the world. You're seen as a couple, not just a couple, but in the eyes of the law, you're actually responsible for the life of that other person. If they're in the hospital and someone has to decide whether or not they're going to turn off the switch to end their life, guess who makes that decision? Spouse, unless they have different orders in their living will. However, that's who it falls to. When somebody dies, we're responsible for their bills and their debts and taking care of the estate. And everybody in the circle of friends and the family will see the widower as the last living testament of that person in this lifetime. So then the spouse becomes the voice for that dead person. That's a huge responsibility to carry, especially if they have children. So they're always in a state of being in this middle place where they're trying to make sure that the family's okay, the friends are okay, that they're okay, often coming last. And that's particularly true for a lot of men, because men will tend to take care of everyone else and completely ignore how they're feeling or doing. It's like, I'm fine, take care of my kids. I'm fine. Her sister's really grieving, and they're really not fine. But once everybody is fine, then they might find space to take care of themselves. And that might be the time that they start to date, or some of them start right away because they don't really want to deal with what they're feeling. So everybody's different. All situations can happen and be. Some people can start early. Again, going back to the first tips that I gave you to see how they process their grief is what you need to find out. Okay, so they're rebuilding their identity. They may have had traumatic loss. So this also means that they might not know what to expect from themselves, because unless they've been widowed before, they've never been through this. And it is one of the most life-altering, shocking experiences that somebody can go through. One of the top two or three. And not knowing what to expect from themselves means that they may say, hey, I'm ready to do this, or let's do that, or this is how I'm doing it, all is well. And then they fall off a cliff 2 weeks later, and you're like, what the hell happened to that guy I was dating? Or she was so into me, and now she's not even talking to me. What's happening? So this is that hot and cold thing that widows will go through. And that also is normal. But this is where you need to be able to have good communication. And then back to the original tips, how have they processed their loss? If they haven't processed their loss properly, or they're not in tune with what's going on within them, they would be more likely to do things like ghosting you, more likely to be hot and cold and run you through a roller coaster, which is not fair to you. So it's really important that they do the work on themselves and that they have engaged in that. Okay, so let's move on to number 4. You, as a person dating a widower, need to not be someone who's quick to jealousy. If you're a very jealous person, very possessive person, it's going to be harder for you to date someone who's been widowed than other people. So you need to know this about yourself. Now, I'm not judging you and saying you're a bad person or wrong person for being jealous and possessive, because maybe that's just how it is. Or maybe this is an opportunity for you to be able to work on this part of your personality. Because the widow will always, always love their late spouse. They, as I've said before, didn't divorce this person. And I've said it before, that there's some element of choice involved in a divorce. Now, people have argued with me and said, I didn't choose a divorce. And I would give my compassion to that person who didn't choose the divorce. But someone chose it. Okay? Someone chose it. Divorces are not caused upon people. Someone chooses to end the marriage in some kind of a way, whether or not it was what was best for them and it wasn't what they wanted to begin with. Someone's got to sit and sign a paperwork that says, I agree to this, or they feel coerced into doing it, but there's some choice involved. With a death, there is zero choice involved when it comes to the person who's left. Zero choice. And I say this as somebody who's been divorced and widowed. So I speak from a point of lived experience. Okay. So you didn't choose your divorce. I absolutely sympathize with you. And I hear you. And I want everyone to know that we hear you as well. Also know that not only would they always love them, but if they've done the work, then they also know that they have space to love someone else as well, no matter how much they love that other person. If they've done the work, they know that the love they had for that spouse is a time capsule of their life that is like hermetically sealed. Not that it's over in terms of the love they had for them, but that time in their life is hermetically sealed. And now they're into a new life that they may not have asked for, and that may still involve grief, moving through the story of the past and being more present into the future, which is the now, because the future is really just a projection of our imagination. It's never then, because when we get to then, it's now again. You just wrap your head around that one. It's always now. So family is forever. So if they have kids, they have stepkids, if they have in-laws, that is someone that's always going to be their family. And it would be unfair to ask them to no longer engage with the in-laws or the stepkids or things like that, or their children that they had together, because that was their family. And just because the spouse died didn't mean that the family ended. The family's still alive. So there's a fine line here too, because you may, if you come in together as adults, come in with your own family or your own story, and you don't want to be the third wheel in this person's life. So it's also important that you're able to be incorporated into that person's life and story. Now, it's going to depend on whether if they have small children versus whether they have adult children, if they have aging in-laws versus young and healthy in-laws. There's all kinds of variants that you have to take into consideration and see how they apply to you. But if they still enjoy spending time with the family members, can they incorporate you? Can they include you? Is the family accepting of you? Now, if the family's not accepting of you, that's nothing that you really have much control over. And the widow also has very little control over whether or not they accept you. They may have some influence based on how they present the situation. However, they can't control for it. So you also have to sit in that, okay, I can't do anything about that. How does the widow respect you? Do they say, I apologize for the way my children are acting or the way my in-laws are acting, but I'm not going to hide you. You're an important part of my life and I want you to be in it. We'll do this together. It's going to take time. And eventually, I hope that they will come to accept that I'm into a new phase of my life now and that they also will accept you as my new partner. So they've got to stand in their strength and their own integrity to own the choices that they've made to include you in their life, even if the family's rejecting. Hopefully that's not the case. I see more often than not families being maybe a little bit tentative, cautious because they want to protect the widower, make sure that he's not hurt or that he's not making brash decisions. So they'll maybe cautious. But if you're true and you're right and you're the one, then time will tell and it will prove the test of time for both of you. So you need to have a lot of patience. So patience is the next one that you're going to need because all of these things require knowledge, education, insight on your part, on their part, and knowing that if they're going to have a hard time prioritizing you over the children, depending again on the age, if they're dependent children, the kids are going to have to come first. They should make time for you as well, but the kids are coming first because here's something you also need to know. If there's small children, when they lose a parent, okay, that child has lost half of their entire world. Put it like this. Let's imagine that you woke up tomorrow and everyone in your world was suddenly gone. Your barber, your hairdresser, your manicurist, your therapist, the grocer you like down on the corner street, the gym that you go to, your people that are closer to you, maybe you're taking a class, the teachers all disappear. Let's just get closer and closer and closer. And you wake up and they're all gone. That's what it's like for a child to lose a parent. They lose half of their world because the parents are their entire world. Now, if you're working with adult children, okay, then their concept of themselves in the loss of the parent is going to go. So it's going to be on a different level. But if you look to the core child that's within us all, they're going to be experiencing some of that. But it's not quite as intense as it is for the small child. So you've got to have a lot of compassion to know that not only is the widower feeling intensely responsible for for the small children, for the extended family, for the representation they have as the last voice on earth of their dead spouse, and all of the finances and responsibilities for the future. Maybe they weren't left anything. Maybe now they feel like they have to do it all on their own because that kid or the kids are the only person now that that child has to rely on. The pressure is immense. Even if you, as a man or a woman, are stepping up to saying, hey, I'd be happy to share this responsibility with these kids. Let me help out. This is going to take patience because this is where the trust has to come in. And trust takes time and shared experience. You cannot expect to walk into somebody's life and just say, hey, I'm a great guy or girl. Trust me, we'll make a life together. It sounds nice, and it's definitely a great place to start. However, in order for that to be true, you have to have time under your belt to be able to look behind you and say, yes, this is someone I can trust. This is someone who's going to be here for me. This is someone that's not going to walk away from me when I'm in a bad mood or I'm in a deep grief state, or somebody who can actually talk out problems with me. These things help you to be able to move forward with your widow or widower. So because it takes time to form the bond, and the time is something you don't have that the late spouse did have. Okay? They had time to create the bonds and to create the story and to create the family and create all the memories. You don't have that advantage. So you can't expect to come in and be treated with the same level of depth and commitment in the beginning. In the beginning. It is fair for you to expect that to grow and develop between the two of you, and for them to treat you fairly, to treat you as a priority. But to prioritize you over small children would be something very difficult for a widow or widower to do, because if they leave their children, let's say you're like, hey, let's go out for a romantic weekend, and leave your kids with grandma or friend or whatever that would look like. And the widower says, no, I'm sorry, I can't do that. And then you're feeling, well, you just can't prioritize me. This isn't the case at all. And the widower may not recognize this, but what's deep inside most of parents of younger children is that they're all their kids have left. What if something, they may be asking themselves this, what if something happened to me while I'm gone? If I have a car accident, if I fall off a sailboat that we're going on a romantic, if I have a car crash, if the plane falls out of the sky, anything, you know, if we have a terrorist attack and I can't get back to my kids, these things are going to be fears within them. And it's going to make a lot of them really hesitant to leave their small children because they don't want to leave their kids alone in the world anymore. So this is another piece that takes compassion. This will ease up as the children grow older. It will ease up as they grow older, but this is where the patience comes back in, and that this isn't a bag for everybody to be with a widow. Now, if they have adult children, they may still have some of that feeling, oh, mom, all my kids have left. And that's some good work for them to do because they're no longer children. But our babies are always our babies. Right? So, but when there's a traumatic loss, sometimes the attachment can get more clingy because they're scared to lose anything. They don't want to lose the attachments. They don't want to lose the relationship. They want to make sure their kids are feeling safe in the world, even adult children. And so this is where the widower may need to do some work to be able to release some of those ties and loosen them up as they heal from the loss, and know that it's okay for them to be able to live their life and enjoy a holiday with you or incorporate you into their world, however that looks, but a little bit at a time. So when it goes back to the late spouse had time on their side, you don't have that yet, don't feel bad about it, but know that time is now on your side because you're here to build a new bond. You're here to build a new life with this person. You are here to create a new identity within the partnership with this person, and that this may take years to do, and that that's okay. It's not a competition between you and the late spouse, unless the widower makes it such. if they're comparing you to their late wife. That could be a problem. And they need to be aware of it. Going back to tips number 1, did they do the work? Are they doing the work? And if they make a mistake, allow them space to be able to learn through conversation. Because again, back to prior tips, they've never been through this before. They may think maybe they've been divorced before, maybe they've had breakups when they were younger, and they think, hey, you know what? Okay, I'll get back on the saddle and I'll start dating again. And this feels totally different. And they're not expecting that. Now, totally different may look like, oh my God, I'm so enthralled and thrilled with this new person, and they fall madly, wildly in love with you, like over the top in love with you. And you're like, wow, this is amazing. And then they crash and burn or get weird. That can happen. So again, because they've never been through this before, they don't even know what to expect from themselves. So being able to have that conversation to say, hey, this is what I'm observing. This is what I see is going on. And I want to make sure that you're getting the help, care, and support that you need for this time, because I'm thrilled to be with you and I'm down for this, but this back and forth stuff doesn't work for me. It's painful and it's not okay. This is what I need from you. You're having a time where you're down, where you're having a day where you need to be alone. I need some good, clear communication, which is I need to have a day by myself. And then for the person to take responsibility. I'm so sorry. And this isn't about you, to be able to give you reassurance. Okay? Give you reassurance. This isn't about you, my darling. I adore you. I need a day. I'm not in a good space today. And this isn't about you. Please, I'll call you tomorrow by 6 o'clock. And if you make a commitment to call somebody by 6 o'clock, you call them by 6 o'clock. Okay. Because you've got to know, if you're a widower, that you've got to create a safe space for this person who's dating you, because they're taking a risk too. You've been in love with someone else for 20 years, 30 years, 10 years, 5 years, 6 months. I don't know. But for whatever amount of time, you weren't in love with them. And so it's your job as the widower to give them some reassurance, which might look like, I don't know what's going on for me right now, but I know I will contact you tomorrow. And then the reassurance of, this isn't about you. It's about me, truly. And thank you for your patience. Thank you for your kindness with me. And maybe we'll make a plan for this weekend. You have to always get back to them. If you want to keep this person around and you're the widower, you've got to provide reassurance and safety, even if you don't know what the hell you're doing. Set milestones and dates and times, some structure for yourself. So you give yourself space to be able to reassess where you're at. And then a guideline to be able to get back and respect the other person that's also taking a risk on you as the widower. Okay. So the next thing and the final thing that you've got to pay attention to is, if you're just early dating, say you've met this person on the internet and you've had a couple of dates and there's just some fantastic chemistry, or they're coming on hot and heavy, they may be in a state of widow's fire. And widow's fire can look different for different people. Some people are very serious about their intentions towards finding someone else, and they have widow's fire, which is like, hey, I really would like to have a new partner. I don't particularly care to be alone in life. I would love to start over and invest in my life, and I'm hot and heavy. Okay, so those can come together. Or the person could look like, I'm lonely, I'm sad, I'm devastated, I need human touch, I have a burning desire for sex, and I'm going to go with the first person who will give it to me. And then they do. And they do it unconsciously, without doing the work on themselves, without having any real insight into their process, without being fully present with their emotional state. And then they just think, okay, I'm in a state of numbness. I need physical affection. I'm going to go grab this person, move them, bring them back to my bedroom. And then you may be, I don't want to say the victim of that, but you might be the recipient of that widow's fire, hoping and expecting that you might get something long lasting out of this engagement. And then what you get is some hot and heavy, and then ghosting or rejection. So if you are concerned about that, revisit the early points I made in this and what you need to know now to make this work. Do your check boxes. Are these things in place? Okay? And if these things are in place for you and you have some understanding, you have compassion, the other person's showing up, the other person's done their work, or they're engaged in it actively. They have actually something to share with you, despite the fact they have a grief and loss in their heart. Okay, then they could be safe to move forward with and have fun with the widow's fire. It could be a great adventure. But know that you're getting somebody who can bring you quality and not just a quantity of passion, because then you're going to get hurt by this person. There's no surefire way to say how someone's going to be. You've got to be your own private investigator. And I don't mean in a shady way. I mean in a way that you honor and respect yourself as a man, as a woman. You all deserve to have love. You deserve to be cherished. You deserve to be cared for and respected. And so does the widow. And each person is bringing something different and new to the relationship that they've never had before under these circumstances. And you maybe never have had before either. And then also, don't be afraid to move on if it's not working for you. Okay? If you feel like you just hit a brick wall and there's not another area for you guys to go, it's okay to let it go sometimes as well. Because some people are just in our lives for a season to teach us something, to help us evolve, expand, or enlighten us to about what we really truly do want or need in our lives. So allow yourselves to be students of your own experiences. So thank you very much for being here tonight. And I hope that this part 2 of what you need to know now to make this work, because maybe you found the one, has been useful for you. Much love and many blessings.